This is the all-new 2024 Ducati Hypermotard 698 Mono, and look, from the promotional videos and the press launch, we certainly know that it can definitely do the crazy supermoto track thing, but what it's got me wondering is at £10,995 starting price, is it actually an interesting alternative to like a regular sporty naked bike for the road? You see, on paper, it certainly looks like it should be a lot of fun, and so in this video, we'll take it for a spin to go through all the pros and cons to find out. But before we get going, a huge thanks to Kawamoto for supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. I'm using their brilliant app on the handlebars today, which has motorcycle-specific navigation using their own algorithm developed in-house. That means that they can seek out the best twisties and winding roads, so you never have to ride a boring straight one again. It's the perfect companion if you're planning a tour and you aren't familiar with the local roads, but equally, you can use it to mix up your regular routes back home. So do check out the links down in the description below to find out more, and you'll also find down there a code for a free trial, as well as another discount code in case you do decide to try out their premium membership. Now we've got to start off by talking about this engine, the new Super Quattro Mono, which is effectively one of the cylinders from the V-twin in the 1299 Panigale. As such, you've got some very over square dimensions, so the bore is much wider than the stroke is long, and typically what you'll find with that sort of engine is that it makes most of its power at the top end at the sacrifice of some bottom end and torque. So yeah, you'll see it revs up to 10,000 RPM, and one of the benefits of that is that it makes quite decent peak power. Woo! So 77.5 horsepower, which for a 698 single is pretty impressive, and actually makes it, according to the Ducati press release, the most powerful production single cylinder bike ever made. Now 77.5 horsepower might not sound like a great deal if you put it in the context of, you know, general road bikes, but keep in mind this is a supermoto, so it's pretty slim, pretty light, and so I think for most riders, certainly for road use, it's going to feel like enough. Now perhaps the more seasoned supermoto rider might enjoy that immediate bottom end punch that you get more so from something like the KTM 690. But I think for the rest of us, especially if you're considering this as a road bike, then actually having a little bit of softness lowering the revs might be beneficial. It's nicely fueled and not too abrupt, and so it's actually quite easy to get on with in a way that you might not expect if you've previously ridden big singles. And look, don't get me wrong, it really does start to buzz like a single when you properly rev it up, but also it's surprisingly smooth down in the bottom half of the rev range under 5,000 RPM, and so if you're just pottering around, it purrs away nicely, and I feel like I could ride it all day long without annoyance. Now, as you'd expect from Ducati, the quick shifter on this bike is absolutely on point, and although you do have to spec it as an accessory on the base bike or pay for this RVE edition where it comes as standard, you know, at least if you are going to pay your money for it, it's going to be good. Very crisp, very quick, and also, despite the fact that this bike is running the standard stock exhaust system, not the £2,000 track special, you know, when you're shifting down and it's blipping, it is making some really nice pops at the exhaust that add to the entertainment, even if you're just stopping at a junction like this. Now, I don't think it'll come as a huge surprise to anybody that this bike is pretty slender when it comes to the weighing scales. It's 150-ish kilograms without fuel, and so with a 12-litre tank up front, you're realistically looking at about 160 all in. And whilst for a supermoto, that probably is on the heavier side because it's a large capacity bike in the supermoto spectrum, if you're comparing it to a general road bike or a naked bike, it's really very light and pretty much lighter than anything else you could consider. And so look, in terms of the effect on the handling, it's just joyous. It's a bike that you can put exactly where you want it, and changes in direction are about as easy as it gets. And that's also aided by the fact that you've got a really decent chassis spec here. So braking, for example, it's a 4-piston radially mounted caliper up front with a Brembo radial master cylinder, and so it stops exceptionally well with plenty of feel through the lever. And yes, it is only a single disc, but it's a nice big 330mm disc, and I think I'm right in saying that that's basically one of the discs from the twin disc setup on the Panigale V4. Oh, this is a lot of fun, this bike. Now the fork is from Marzocchi. It's a chunky 45mm upside down fork, full adjustability as well. The monoshock is from Sachs, and while both are fairly long, so it's not a bike that really hugs the road, you know, you can feel the qualities there. And also the adjustability, if you're going to push this bike a little bit harder on the track, for example, is exactly what you'll need. Now there's 17-inch wheels front and rear, with it being a supermoto, cast aluminium, and they're shod with Pirelli's excellent Diablo Rosso 4s, which are a great sporty all-rounder for the road. And yes, handling is up there with being about as fun as it gets. And this is all wrapped up in what I think is a really nice looking bike that's got some of the best bits of its bigger sibling, the Hypermotard 950, but just in this sort of slimmer overall size, which I think possibly suits the genre of bike better. And I think of the two, it might be my pick, especially in this RVE paint job with the extra graphics. I mean, I know they're not particularly subtle, but then a supermoto isn't meant to be. And then yeah, if you realistically compare it to something like the KTM 690 and the other bikes built on that platform, the Husqvarna 701, the GasGas 700, those are pretty much, as a supermoto should be, big dirt bikes with road wheels and tyres. They're basic, they're simple, they're plasticky in the finish. Whereas this is everything you'd expect from Ducati, with a lot more attention to detail and a feel to the bike that just has this extra quality. And it also has to be said, it goes beyond and above what you'd expect from your average supermoto when it comes to techie features like riding modes and rider aids. There are 4 modes to choose from, so sport, road, urban and wet. And within that, you've got 4 levels of traction control, 4 levels of ABS, 4 levels of wheelie control, engine braking control, launch control, a wheelie assist feature if you spec the track exhaust, because it's effectively a track feature, but it allows you to maintain a fairly high wheelie. And then yeah, the excellent up and down quick shifter that we've already talked about. So look, if you want a supermoto style bike with a few extra safety nets that's pretty much on a par with any other modern road bike, then under the hood, this has got the works. Thing is though, all bikes have their, you know, compromises and trade-offs, and I think one of them on this bike might be in the cockpit with the dash, with a fairly simple LCD display or inverted LCD display, as opposed to the full color TFT displays that are becoming more and more common now for road bikes, even at fairly aggressive price points. And look, I think this is probably what you'd expect for a supermoto bike. They do tend to be a little more simple, and it's perfectly usable and it's easy enough to manage all the modes and whatnot. But if you are somebody who really likes to have lots of screen space for the menus and connectivity and navigation and stuff like that, then this isn't a bike that really offers that capability. Still, you could argue the solution is pretty simple, which is to put your phone on the bars with a quad lock or something like that and use an app like Kalamoto for your navigation. Now, the other potential drawback on this bike that we have to discuss, certainly for some riders anyway, will be the height. At 904mm as standard, it's taller than even the 950 Hypermotard, and so if you are a little short in the leg, then that's pretty much going to rule it out immediately. I will say though, it is quite slim and of course very light, so at 5'9" or 175cm, I don't find it particularly intimidating, but at the same time I do understand that some riders like to be able to plant both feet on both sides, and unless you're very, very tall, that's probably not going to be possible here. There are a couple of options though in the accessories catalogue, a low seat and a suspension lowering kit, and if you combine both of them you can get it down to a much more reasonable 849mm. But of course, not having tried it in that setup, I can't comment on how it'd affect the ergonomics and the handling, and also there's some extra spend when it comes to those two accessories. Now look, while there is certainly a benefit to having that very slender saddle in terms of being able to move around the bike for that quicker riding and also reaching down to the floor, the trade-off is that there's not a great amount of support for the butt, and so this isn't gonna be the most comfy bike you'll ever find. Now that isn't really a criticism of Ducati's design choices here, because that's absolutely par for the course for a supermoto style of bike. Supermotos are built for short, sharp blasts, but yeah, you are sat pretty upright, and so you catch a lot of the wind. And then the slimness of the saddle just means it's probably not going to be the sort of bike you'd want to do massive stints on. Woohoo! Short ones though, have at it. As for the price, well, like I said at the top of this video, it's £10,995 for the standard 698 mono. And while that is a bit more than the KTM 690 and all the other bikes that are built on that platform, you could argue the level of finish you're getting here is probably worth it. And also there are quite a lot more features and tech. I should say though, for this particular RVE version with the fancy paint job and the up and down quick shifter and a bit of colour on the wheels as well, it does come in at $11,895. And while that is a lot of money and it's getting a little bit close to the $12,795 of the 950 Hypermotard, you know, I don't think there are many bikes, if any, that do the exact same thing. So if you are looking for something with the single-cylinder supermoto fundamentals, with the tall, lightweight chassis, but also with that level of fit and finish that you'd expect from Ducati, then this is realistically the only bike that's going to tick those boxes, and so you can probably get your head around justifying the price. But honestly, I think anyone who wants something a bit distinctive and different from your average road bike, you know, providing you can get on with the height, will almost certainly have a great time riding this thing, and it's almost certainly as well worth a demo. As always though, I'd love to know what you think of it, so do let me know down in the comments below. And also, a great alternative if you want a Ducati but something more typical of a road bike would be the brilliant Monster SP. So I'll put my review of that bike on the screen now, so you can give it a click and give it a watch in case you haven't already. Also, do hit subscribe if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you in the next video.